this Lent, we're looking at knowing God better, knowing God more through Jesus Christ. So we're going to be looking at God in maybe some new ways we don't typically think about after looking at who Jesus is. And maybe looking at some of the old familiar things we think about God, but in a new light, in a new way. When we think about the attributes of God, what do you think of that? If you were asked to describe God, what would you say? What words come to mind? I remember, it must have been several months ago, upstairs in the Sunday school room, Stephanie and Katie were playing a game with a ball. And you had to toss the ball to the other person and say something about God. Say an attribute or a sentence about God. And once you said something, you tossed it to the next person. Then I joined in, and we'd go on and on. As you were forced to think about the attributes of God, you were forced to become a little more creative and less using those typical things of love, holy, almighty, sovereign, and then you run out. Think of things in new ways. Since we are endeavoring to know God through Jesus Christ, since Jesus is the primary revelation of God, Jesus is God incarnate, I thought it only fitting to begin our study with the beginning. To start at the beginning, both of creation and of Jesus' life on earth. And so we find ourselves in Genesis and in John 1. If we take a little time, we think back 3 months to the beginning of Advent, and we reacquaint ourselves with the Nativity story, with that whole idea of God taking on flesh and living among us, dwelling among us. What might that tell us about God? Take a moment. Think back. It's November 31st, it's December 7th, 8th. We're here, we have purple instead of white, we have the Advent leaf. You're thinking about the Nativity story. What does that tell us about the nature of God? I'm sure we could have a nice round table discussion. Everybody would be able to say something different, something unique, something important about who God is, because what God did and what we celebrate is Christmas time. But I want to talk about the idea today that we worship a courageous God. Have you ever thought about God being courageous? I admit I never did for years. That thought never even crossed my mind. A courageous God? I think often we don't think of God really having emotions or doubts or anything. I think sometimes we just kind of think of God of being there. God has a plan, God does it, nothing affects God. God just does. God acts without emotions in these. Because oftentimes I think we see emotions as weakness. Oh, you let your emotions get the best of you, we say. And we don't want God to have that problem, and so God becomes emotionless. But I think not only is that wrong, we lose something. Christianity loses something when we take those things away from God. Maybe sometimes we think of God just like a robot. There's a plan, God acts, God just does what God does. The first person to introduce me to the idea of a courageous God was a man named G.K. Chesterton in his book called Orthodoxy. Chesterton was an early 20th century writer, wasn't a minister or anything, was a journalist. He wrote fiction, stories, and essays. But he wrote this book called Orthodoxy, and it was one of the first books on Christianity that I really read and meant something to me. So I want to read a little bit of that. Just a paragraph, something that I highlighted years ago. You can almost barely see the highlight now, it's all dried up. One of the first books I ever really read. Listen to what Chesterton says. But if the divinity of Christ is true, and it's certainly terribly revolutionary, that a good man may have his back to the wall was no more than we knew already. But that God could have his back to the wall is a boast for all insurgents forever. Christianity is the only religion on earth that has felt that omnipotence made God incomplete. Christianity alone has felt that God, to be holy God, must have been a rebel as well as a king. Alone of all creeds, Christianity has had added courage to the virtues of the Creator. For the only courage worth calling courage must necessarily mean that the soul passes a breaking point and does not break. Courage to the list of virtues of the Creator. It took me a while to really get that, but I thought it was important when I read it, and so I highlighted it, knowing maybe one day I might want to come back to that thought, when I could understand it maybe a little bit more. I think I caught maybe just a small glimpse, not even what you would call an analogy, but just a small glimpse, like when you're walking past a window and out of the corner of your eye, you think you see something. And you go back and you look again, but it's not there. Maybe I just caught one of those glimpses. But when I was a young life leader in Columbia, we had to go to the high schools and hang out with students. We took this as the incarnational model of ministry, the idea that God became incarnate and lived among people, was with people in order to reveal God. And so we must be incarnate among people as well. And I think I took that for granted for so long, because the leaders I knew in high school, they came to the high school and immediately there were 10, 15 people around and everybody wanted to talk to them. It must have been easy. I didn't think about the first few times that person came in and didn't know anyone. Well, I started going to the local high school, and at first I'd kind of go to a football game and sit in the stands. I didn't know anyone. It didn't take much courage to sit there just watching a football game. And I told myself I should just go a few times to these football games and sit there, let people get used to me, let them see me. It's important just to be seen for a while. And I told myself that to justify my inaction because honestly I was scared. I didn't want to just go out and talk to people. And I'd go to the lunchroom with other leaders and we'd stand by the door as people came in, and some knew other leaders and they'd come and say hi, and I'd stand there and wave and be introduced. And I kind of liked staying right where I was. It was safe. I knew that little podium by the trash can, by the front door, and I liked it. It was right there. I felt safe. People could walk past. We didn't have to really get into any big conversations because I was scared. Several reasons, really. First, I didn't want to look like an idiot. No one wants to look like an idiot. I didn't want to be laughed at. I didn't want to face rejection if I tried to go and talk to some people. I didn't want to deal with those uncomfortable silences. The type when you go and you talk to somebody for the first time, let's say it's a high school student, you're down at the table, you ask them their name, what grade they're in, do you play any sports, how's school, then you start going into, what do you think of this weather, huh? Huh? And then you sit there, you look at each other. All right, nice meeting you, and it's awkward and weird. I didn't want to deal with those. And I wonder if God ever felt like that. I wonder if the second person of the Trinity was ever nervous about coming to earth, knowing how we people are, knowing what we say about and what we do to people who really tell us the truth. I wonder if he was scared of what people would say behind his back